So the integrated turbine pump, as the name suggests, is a combination of a turbine and a pump. It's a hydro-powered pumping device, namely it's a pump that works and operates solely on the power provided by the water it lifts. It's a combination of a sort of Kaplan turbine with a multi-stage centrifugal pump. At the moment, it's in experimental phase and it's being tested in the hydraulics lab of Delft University of Technology. However, there are other products made by Akista, by the company who produces the integrated turbine pump, that are already being commercialized and out there in the field. The flagship product of their production is the so-called Barsha pump. With respect to the collaborations, I think that we are in an interesting point in history where we have a lot of intersection between sustainability from its different dimensions and global development. So we have a lot of actors like academia, researchers, practitioners, NGOs, private companies, governments, etc., that are highly interested in the intersections of these 2 points. Therefore, the creation of the network of these different actors is something crucial to establish these synergies that start somehow emerging. And that's a way in which I would suggest to start creating this different network of actors. And with respect to to the goal of my initiatives, actually I'm trying to understand how innovative business models like sustainable product service systems can help in stimulating the effective adoption of these kind of technologies that operate on clean technologies. And that's because the technology by itself, even though it's environmentally friendly, does not ensure that it will be effectively adopted. Therefore, I'm studying this sort of missing link on how the business model can help in this process. To answer that question, first I would like to link the word solutions to technology. Provided that there are technological solutions for virtually everything, then we have to address the challenges in domains that fall way beyond the technology itself. So we have to think to what extent the different countries, their policies, and these regulatory frameworks may hamper or may contribute to the effective adoption of certain technological solutions in given contexts. For example, in countries where you have some kind of subsidies, perhaps this may facilitate the spread and adoption of these technologies, or on the other side, if because of some importing fees and taxes, the technologies become way too expensive, then of course this will be a point of discouragement. Second, we have to think on how familiar are the final users, the people, the communities with respect to these new technologies. So these technologies can be environmentally friendly, can be an effective solution to cope with a decarbonizing future, and etc. But if the people do not have means to get to know what these technologies are, where may I find them, how they operate, then we are creating a knowledge gap between the people and the technological solution. A third challenge I would like to point out is that related to financial means. So first, if the technology is out there and on the other side it's also accessible, is it actually affordable for the people? So it doesn't matter whether I know about certain technology, but if it's not affordable for my financial needs, then basically I'm once again um, undergoing this gap between the technology and the user. And there are a number of mechanisms that several authors discuss around. For example, you can think of microcredits, of loans, different business models that can help in coping with this financial bridge. Another challenge I would like to mention is that of trainability in terms of how knowledgeable are the users, the communities with respect to this technology. So it's not just about installing and providing them with these clean solutions that may help into a sustainable transition, but actually to make them feel empowered, to be empowered. So how to transfer this expertise, this know-how so that people know what the technology is, what are their benefits, how to manage the expectations, what are their limits, and what's actually what the technology is helping them to achieve in the mid and long term. And last but not least, closing the loop a bit back to the physical side of the problem, it's that related to the after sales services. This is not a minor problem because imagine if we have a device like the integrated turbine pump that doesn't operate in any fossil fuel or electricity, and then you are able to install it in a relatively remote community, what happens if indeed something breaks down? You need a spare part, you need someone who goes with the spare part, you need someone who knows how to replace this spare part and commission again this device. So it's really another challenge to keep in mind. So as a very personal position, I think it's time for academia to open itself. So nowadays, we need to think of who are the users, who are the communities who get perhaps benefited from these clean solutions, clean technologies, and it's time to hear what the civil society, what these communities have to say. Moreover, it's not only about we ourselves being the experts and the creators of these kind of solutions, but I think we should how to co-create, how to co-produce with the final users, and that means that we have to manage well the expectations not only about the side of academia, but nowadays we have to think on how to manage the expectation of multiple actors that are not directly involved in academia, and more particularly thinking from a human-centered approach, what are the expectations, the knowledge, the frustrations, the ideals that the end users, the communities may have. I think we are in an interesting time of the history where there is a momentum about sustainability. So in a way or another, different actors, regardless their geographical location, we all are kind of discussing on what sustainability may look like. But there is the need of sitting down and taking this momentum to start pushing forward this discussion. This may enable to create and to identify clearly what are these synergy and intersection points between these different actors involved in the scenario of the global development. The second opportunity, I think, it's this urgent need. We need to be more sustainable. And that's in the forefront, in a way or another, in the political agenda worldwide. And the third one, now relating a bit more to the technology, I would say it's the maturity and consequent decrease in prices of clean technologies, like means of production and harvesting of renewable energies. If we can think of, for example, PV panels, their prices have decreased dramatically in the last 2 decades. So that enables more solutions to become accessible and affordable for the people. On the other side, now coming back to the barriers, I would say first, the political affairs, at the same time, it's an opportunity, but also a barrier. So we have a network of powerful actors worldwide which do not hesitate into doing a lot of political lobbying in order to promote some particular interests that are not necessarily aligned with a sustainable future. At the same time, what we can see is that some of these powerful actors look to another place rather than facing the challenges that we have ahead. And especially given that they are these crucial actors that have a strong saying that can do something, but unfortunately, they decide not to do so. And last but not least, in this first barrier, I would say it's these shy interventions, very shy, tiny step aheads that may be an interesting initiative, but by the end, ultimately, they are not effective. And as a second barrier, I would like to recall this recurrence of the pervasive traditional top down approach, this historical viewpoint of the Western world thinking that the West should provide solutions and therefore we give everything as a given. And at the same time, literature over the years has gathered a lot of cases and information that this eventually doesn't work. I think the most beautiful part of small scale interventions is that it allows you to have the perspective of a bottom up approach. So that enables you really to listen the users, the people behind those numbers, those macro numbers of the communities and what development is in those indexes, but rather that takes you literally to the field, to the ground, where you can really hear them. You can really feel what are their needs, expectations, frustrations, and so forth. So based on these grounds, based on this point, I would say this also allows you, this small scale intervention allows you to really learn deeply from the interactions between the proposed solutions and the communities that are supposed to get benefited from these solutions. Of course, I would say the enriching part of the bottom up approach is precisely to observe what these interactions are and to which potential scenarios this may lead in the future. And that may refer to either a technological device, an artifact, or anything else that may be considered this kind of small scale intervention, rather a pilot project of something, rather trying out certain prototype, or even trying certain strategies through which you can intervene in the social dynamics of these local communities. At the same time, these interventions allows you to identify clearly strengths and weaknesses of that intervention that you are proposing. So having the chance of reinforcing those positive points and trying to cope with, to interact, or in the worst of the cases, to mitigate or compensate what's happening on the downside, on the negative side of the story. Moreover, as I have said, because it's not a straightforward process, it enables you to iterate cyclically. So to have this back and forth process of I propose, you try, you give me your feedback, we discuss, we sit down to negotiate together what's happening here and what can be the most beneficial for the parties involved in the case that we are analyzing or the solution that we are proposing. So I think this is in contrast with this traditional top-down approach where really the end users do not have much of a say, where usually these solutions or interventions were just given to their local context without much of this sensitive touch of what a technology or a given solution may have. And with respect to how to scale up or how to reach large impacts based on these small scale interventions, I think I would like to resort to this kind of cliche in which it's better to have small step ahead, but that we may really feel that they are secure steps. That regardless how small this step is ahead, it's a step that it's not going to turn back and rather taking us to this more sustainable future. I would like to focus on three particular lessons, being the first one, hear the people. I cannot stress much more how important it is to hear the people. Go out there and see what people have to say. So learn from their knowledge, their expectations, their frustrations, their past experiences, and really be humble to hear what they have to say, because that will make your solution not only more culture sensitive, it will help you significantly in improving whatever you are proposing for a more sustainable future. The second lesson, I would say, be careful of building resilient networks of partners. And while saying network of partners, I'm not limiting myself about academia or researchers, but make yourself open to partner with NGOs, with government representatives, with private companies, with members of the civil society, with members of the local communities in such a way that you can create a group that is able to push forward your solutions, your initiatives, to get you closer in contact with the communities, but also, and especially given this current COVID crisis, unfortunately, I would say having the important point of being able to keep acting even if you cannot physically move around. Because your solution shouldn't depend just on your shoulders, but rather on the strength and the resilience of this network of partners yet that you are still able to rely on. And last, but certainly not least, even though this may sound a bit like a cliche, I would say be open to change. So you are not providing a perfect, ultimate, one-size-fits-all solution for everything. So things may go wrong, and things certainly will go wrong. But it's up to you if you decide to learn from those mistakes to make things a bit better, to improve your solution, your technology, your artifact, or rather simply failing at it. Actually, let's be open, be humble, learn from the mistakes, and be transparent enough to communicate that to the world so we all can learn together.